Welcome back to a further episode of Men's Inner Health with Mark Randall. In this conversation, I'd like to explore men's depression, the funk and glunk, the flatness, that flat energy that we can cycle around in. And it's quite painful. We're stuck in what I call the metaphorical cave. What's in this depression? How much anxiety can drain the battery, leaving us feeling depressed? How much frustration can we be using that maxes out our thinking brain and leaves us depressed? How much disappointment, self-disappointment, that we pile upon ourselves that's just going to leave us flat. Sometimes when depression is a really problematic issue for us, it can stay for days. And when we do have those good experiences, those positive experiences, we're pinching ourselves because we know, this won't last long, that flatness will be back. The flatness of depression. Depression is a horrible experience. Yes, there's clinical depression where we may need medication, the SSRI medications to assist the brain release more serotonin, which is the mood neurotransmitter in our brain. But I believe we men we carry so much pressure. That pressure, how much of that is self-imposed pressure? Yes, there's pressure in society. We've got families to keep, partners to love, children to raise. We're expected to work a lot harder nowadays, longer hours. What's it costing? How do you know when you're getting depressed? What are you needing when you get depressed? What stops you from asking your partner or a mate to talk about those needs? Maybe you just need help. Maybe you just need to take time out. But we can't have time out because we'll get bored. How do we learn to begin to notice when we're starting to slip back into that metaphorical cave? How do we notice the thinking in our minds when we are starting to get depressed? Where's your positivity gone? Where's your loving kindness? How much are you communicating? One of the main telltale signs of us men going into depression or flatness is just shutting down. We'll talk to no one. What's wrong? Nothing. It's like all the walls just come back up. These walls, we think they're designed to protect us or to, how much shame do we have when we're flat? Where's our energy? Where's our motivation? What motivation? We can become unmotivated. Sometimes how I define depression, I call it we're in the metaphorical cave. And how far back in that cave can we go? If we walked into that cave, what would we see? How dark is it? Is there any light at the end of the tunnel? Sometimes there's no light at the end of the tunnel, not even a glimmer of light. And one of the difficulties with depression is when we're flat, we are unmotivated, amotivated, demotivated, whichever one you want to use. And it is really hard to find enjoyment the simple enjoyments. When you're depressed, what's your thinking process? How dark can the thoughts be? How negative can the thoughts be? When you're depressed, how much angry at ourselves do we become? Pretty intense, I suspect. But when we're super depressed, how much are we just numbing life out? We just go numb. No feeling, just nothing. Really emotionally painful. In that emotional painfulness, how much sadness might be sitting in there? Have you ever checked what's the history? Where did this depression first formulate? Have you been depressed in adolescence, in early adulthood? And sometimes we can find that our depression we can default to depression. When things are not going right, we're putting too much pressure on ourselves, we can re-default back into this depressive affect. Learning to process the emotions that are sitting in the depression isn't easy for us men. When we're depressed, what's happened to the old ego? It's just carked itself. In Eastern philosophy, that's known as ego death, and throughout life we are going to go through many ego deaths. We're going to lose many of our ego identities. And yeah, rebuilding those identities is not an easy process. It takes time. It's, transforming ourselves. But when we're in that cave with the loss of identity, loss of our sense of self, how much sadness might be sitting in that cave? What's your body doing? What's the feelings inside your body? How heavy might your body be? If we walk into that metaphorical cave, and I think I've said this previously in other episodes, is that if we walk into that metaphorical cave and go right to the deepest part of that cave, and we look at ourselves, what might we see? I would imagine that we could see a part of ourselves curled up in a little ball in the fetal position. And in depression, there's feelings of helplessness, hopelessness, powerlessness. Sometimes we even just get nihilistic. What does that part of ourselves need? Now, when we're curled up in the fetal position, we've got no energy. We can't bring loving kindness and self-compassion to ourselves. We can't even motivate ourselves to get out and do something positive. How much loving kindness does that part of you need? I reckon it needs, and from experience, it needs truckloads. Unfortunately, when we're deep down in that cave, in that fetal position, we don't have the energy. We're stuck in it. And we're feeling like shit. And then the mind starts, I am shit, all that negative cognitive distortion stuff. The mind trap of the 88% negative thinking. We don't even look at the positive thinkings. We don't even look at the successes we have. How do we learn to begin to start taking care of ourselves? Yes, we will have the usual normal blues, the ups and downs of life. That's different to this depression. Some days we might not be travelling at 100%, we're only travelling at 80%. And we'll notice that. But it's like, when we're in that cave, and we might only be travelling 10%. But one of the keys with emotional development and insight and awareness is how do we become more aware of ourselves slipping back into the depressive cave, slipping back into that depressive mindset? How do we stop ourselves from going further and further in? How do we put our hands up and own the fact that we're not coping, to own the fact that we're feeling depressed? Rather than carrying shame or being ashamed of this, how can we open up our hearts? How can we open up and talk to our partners, or talk to a therapist or your coach, your life coach, whatever the sort of coach you might have? You know, how often do you sit down and journal the thoughts and the feelings? How often do you journal what were the triggers that took you back into that space? How do we listen to the intuitive self, to that intuitive wisdom deep down inside ourselves? How do we begin to have self-compassion for ourselves when we're feeling a bit flat? When we're feeling a bit flat, can we take the pedal off the metal for a while? Can we then begin to learn that, yeah, look, that part of us that's flat, it is our vulnerable part. How do we start opening up to start to accept that as men, we do have this within us. And there are times where we're just not going to cope. When we're not coping, it's not a failure at all. Right, we might make mistakes. The healthy use of making mistakes is, well, what can I learn from this mistake? Rather than shut ourselves into the cave and just shut all the doors and close all the windows, how do we take steps to talk about it? How do we take the appropriate steps to emote it? You know, when you're depressed, rather be numb. Numbness is it's like a defense shield. It's like a wall around, and you know, in that numbness, what's inside that numbness? Inside that numbness is a part of ourself. How do we talk to that part of ourself? How do we communicate it? How do we care for it? How do we ask our partners for a hug or some reassurance, some validation? How do we talk it out? How do we emote it out? We're ashamed to be in that space. And to ask for help is in our male logical brain or our male social conditioning, you know, it's not okay to admit this stuff. By admitting it, yes, we're exposing our vulnerability, we're exposing ourselves, but rather than shame ourselves over that exposure, how do we accept it's just part of our humanness? Expose it, open it up. And the more we begin to learn to expose these different aspects of ourselves, particularly the parts of us, the depressive part of us, and we talk it through, and in talking it through, you know, surrender to the deep feelings that might be in there. Surrender and allow and practice feeling into that and allowing that emotion to come forth. And yeah, sometimes that emotion may come out as tears. Lordy, your wife's not going to judge you for it. She'll welcome that intimacy. She wants to be able to go in there into that cave and give you love. But because we carry so much shame, it's like we reject that love. We can't receive that love. Guys, when are we going to stop doing this to ourselves? When we're down, open up. Talk to your partner. Let her into the cave. Don't stonewall her out. She's got love to give. Let her give you the love and allow yourself to receive that love. It's an important thing to receive. We deserve to be loved in that space. How do we rewire our thinking about that rather than be ashamed by it? How do we just normalize it? How do we say, hey, darling, I'm really flat. I'm not sure why. I don't know what the trigger was. Maybe it's the old pattern, my old depressive affect. Well, I'm defaulted back there again. Please don't judge yourself. Please seek help. Please ask your partner. Talk to her. Or talk to a mate. Or talk to a therapist. Talk to your life coach. Let's be proactive around this stuff. Be gentle and enjoy.